Bored of normal openings? Try the Grob opening with the daring move g4. It's aggressive, tricky, and packed with dangerous traps that can catch opponents completely off guard. Black usually responds with d5, immediately challenging the pawn on g4. Rather than protecting it, white calmly continues with bishop to g2, appearing to carelessly abandon the pawn. But this is actually part of a deeper idea. The bishop on g2 acts almost like an oversized pawn, tempting black into overconfidence. Later, when white pushes c4, attacking black's d5 pawn, black often assumes white is throwing away yet another pawn and gladly captures it. That's when the hidden tactic appears. White's light-squared bishop suddenly comes alive, capturing the pawn on b7, attacking the rook on a8, and creating a winning opportunity. This type of sneaky tactical play is a hallmark of the Grob opening. After knight to d7, taking the rook on a8 is certainly possible. Black does gain some compensation since white's kingside pawn structure becomes slightly weakened. Still, instead of grabbing the rook right away, I prefer h3, increasing the pressure on black's knight on g4 while keeping the bishop on g2 active and dangerous. At this stage, many opponents think, I can simply play rook to b8 and trap that bishop. It feels like a clever defensive resource. In reality, after the bishop exchange, white comes out with several important benefits. First, the g4 pawn survives, meaning black never managed to neutralize the Grob pawn. Second, the trade opens the g-file, giving white's rook excellent attacking chances. On top of that, the pawn on g4 remains irritating. If black tries to develop the knight, white can push g5, forcing it back and seizing more space. Surprisingly, white often reaches a very playable position here, which is rare for the Grob. The natural follow-up is knight to a3, preparing to recover material. Once the pawn is regained, white may even emerge with a slight positional edge, an impressive outcome for such an unconventional opening. There was actually a fascinating game where black chose knight to e5, leading to a sharp and creative fight. Trying to defend the pawn was pointless, so I captured it anyway. We're playing bold, disrespectful chess, completely ignoring black's threats. The key point is that if black accepts the knight sacrifice, white responds with queen to a4, creating a powerful double attack. Here's how it works. This fork allows white to recover the sacrifice piece while also picking up an extra pawn. In the actual game, black countered with queen to d5, which looked extremely strong at first glance. White then calmly allowed queen takes h1, apparently giving up the rook. It seemed as though black was completely winning. They had captured the rook, attacked the knight, and looked fully in control. But white had prepared a stunning resource. Queen to a4, launching a sudden attack that completely changes the momentum. Now black's king cannot escape, because moving it would allow queen to d7 checkmate. The knight on e5 supports this deadly threat, making defense extremely difficult. Black tried c6, hoping to create some breathing space. Notice that black's queen on h1 is still tied down, protecting the bishop on g2 and preventing white from recapturing immediately. White then played the aggressive e4, shutting down the long diagonal. Black answered by capturing the knight on g1, forcing check. White's king had to move, and with black up an entire rook, it looked like white's position had collapsed. But black still faced one huge issue. Their king remained dangerously exposed. Their queen was stranded deep in white's camp and couldn't return in time to help. In the game, black desperately tried f6, but this failed instantly to queen to c6 check, followed by the beautiful finishing move, knight to f7 checkmate. This game was absolutely brilliant, although it's definitely not the kind of position you'll encounter every day. Now let's take a look at the more standard ideas behind the Grob opening. Black responds with pawn to d5, directly striking at white's center. White continues with the typical bishop to g2, willingly offering the g4 pawn as a gambit, followed by pawn to c4. By now, we understand white's key concept in the Grob opening, opening the long diagonal for the light-squared bishop on g2. If black chooses to support the d5 pawn with a move like pawn to e6, white often answers with queen to b3, one of the most dangerous attacking setups in this opening. The queen and bishop immediately combine forces, placing heavy pressure on the d5 pawn and making black's position very difficult to maintain. But the queen on b3 does more than just attack d5. It also eyes the b7 pawn, creating a powerful battery with the bishop on g2. This can quickly become extremely unpleasant for black, and many players fail to react accurately. One common error is pawn to b6, attempting to defend the b7 pawn. Unfortunately, this move creates major weaknesses. Once white exchanges in the center, the long diagonal suddenly opens and black's position starts collapsing. For instance, after pawn takes d5 and bishop takes d5, white immediately attacks the rook on a8. If black tries to protect the rook, they often miss the dangerous queen and bishop pressure building along the diagonal. White can then launch a crushing attack with ideas such as queen to b4 or even queen to f7, gaining a completely dominant position within only a few moves. Another frequently seen line is when black tries queen to c8, hoping to keep everything defended, but white still maintains strong attacking chances and continuous pressure. However, this defense runs into the same problem. After the exchange in the center, bishop takes d5 attacks both the f7 pawn and the b7 pawn at once. Black may attempt to simplify the position by offering a queen trade, believing it will ease the pressure, but white calmly responds with queen takes b7, attacking the rook on a8, and black remains in serious trouble. Sometimes black chooses bishop to d5, thinking the position is finally secure, but they completely miss white's true idea. You're not planning to take the bishop at all. Instead, white delivers a powerful winning move that immediately takes control of the game. There's also a funny line that appears quite often here. The strongest defensive try for black is usually pawn to c6, aiming to shut down the long diagonal and stop the bishop on g2 from becoming dangerous. But white simply responds with pawn to h3, quietly maintaining the pressure and keeping the initiative firmly in hand. In this position, white's move h3 looks very strange at first. Most opponents expect white to react directly to black's threats, yet white chooses a completely different approach. The purpose of h3 is actually very clever. It encourages black's bishop to move away from the c8 to h3 diagonal, which weakens the defense of the e6 pawn. If black continues with bishop to f5, white follows up with knight to c3, intentionally leaving the d5 pawn hanging. And if black greedily captures with knight takes d5, white is fully prepared to sacrifice the knight in exchange for a powerful attacking position, where the bishop pressures both the f7 and b7 pawns. In practical games, black often avoids taking the knight and instead plays bishop to b6, pinning the knight and threatening to win it later, but white has a strong response with queen to a4, creating a counterpin and suddenly putting black under pressure instead. Now black tries pawn to b5, attempting to chase the bishop away. At first it appears that white's position is collapsing, since both the knight and bishop are attacked at the same time, and saving both pieces seems impossible. But white uncovers a brilliant tactical idea with queen to c2. This move creates a pin along the c-file and completely changes the situation. After the exchange on c8, white simplifies into a remarkable position. Then something incredible happens. After only 11 moves, black somehow ends up recreating their original setup, except for one huge problem. White's tall pawn completely dominates the game. The bishop on g2 has been quietly waiting the entire time, almost disguised as an extra pawn, but now it finally comes alive with bishop takes d5, attacking the rook on a8. Black cannot defend the rook, and white wins decisive material. Of course, some players may say, nobody would ever fall for this against me. But that's not really the point. You don't need to memorize every move in chess like a computer. The true lesson of the Grob opening is understanding the hidden power of the bishop on g2. In many variations, this bishop suddenly explodes onto the long diagonal, and together with the queen, it creates enormous pressure against black's position. That attacking potential is the real beauty of the opening.